Good morning, church. It's so good to see so many of you on the online prayer meeting on Wednesday and for the quiz on Thursday evening. And hopefully even more of you will be able to join next week once we've sorted out the technological difficulties. But it was just wonderful to be able to gather together as a church and to pray through some of these issues, to love one another, to care for one another. And you know, I don't know about you and how you're coping with lockdown right now, but for myself, I find that having been excited about the possibility of having a few days at home initially, I've now moved to a place where the possibility of being able to join online and see some faces and see some of your happy smiling faces and to be able to share the word together and to share prayer together, to join up with the Connect group, is just becoming a more important part of my day. It's the thing you look forward to, because other than that, what have we got? We're sat down, we're at home and just working through things. But it's so good to see you. And this morning we're just going to be looking a little bit about this whole concept of isolation and separation, because I think we're starting to get to understand that and understand a little bit more about how important community is. We've kind of always known it. And in the West, we always talk about community. But I think sometimes with these things, it's only when you actually lose an element of what you used to be able to do that you start to really appreciate the full value of what that really is. And in terms of community, we still have it, but we are having to do it in a different way at the moment. But God has designed us as people who are social beings, people who are community orientated and based, and because of that, when we're on lockdown, when we're disconnected, as many people have already said in the media, it can have an effect on our mental well-being. So with that in mind, let's have a think about the scriptures a little bit and have a think about what we're going to talk about this morning. You see, the lockdown that we're on at the moment, I think it helps us to have a better understanding of some passages of scripture that maybe seemed a little bit alien to us, a little bit foreign to us. And you know, I've read Luke, and probably many of you have, many times. And Luke is a very interesting character. It's well known that he's a doctor. It's well known that he was a thoughtful guy who wanted to write an orderly account. It's well known because it says it in the very opening of the book. It says he wrote an ordered account where he's tried to document and record and detail all of the things that happened during Jesus' time and all of the things that happened during the Apostles' time as well in his second book, which was, of course, Acts. So Luke has detailed all of this stuff, and people like it and people are interested and people know it. But one of the things that gets missed a little bit is within all of that is actually some of the other elements that Luke is very deliberately trying to bring out. So we might know that there's more detail about the birth of Jesus, about Jesus' early childhood, about some of the miracles have a little bit more detail in them perhaps you would get in a book such as Mark. But actually Luke brings out some other stuff, and it is all to do with community. Here are some examples for you. Luke 8:26. I'm just using the starting verse of each of these examples. Go away and have a read of them. Luke 8:26. Jesus heals a man with a demon. This man was in the tombs. If you're in the tombs, that basically means you're in isolation. You're separated from community. And this man was separated because of the impact of the demon on his life. He was too dangerous to be in and around the rest of community. Very shortly after that, in Luke 40, Jesus heals a woman and Jairus' daughter. The woman was the woman with the issue of blood, another taboo subject that caused the woman to be separated, isolated from community. That wasn't just with the issue as well, but that was also the fact just being a woman caused her to be rejected and alienated from certain parts of society. And Luke was very careful to make sure that within the parables, within his discussion, within the stories he brought out, he regularly rotated between a man and then a woman, and then it was about a man and then it was about a woman. Luke 10:25, the Good Samaritan. Now, how is that a story about an outcast? Because the Samaritans were not respected or appreciated by Jewish society because they were half-bloods. They were partially Assyrian and partly Jewish, and they were rejected because of that. So Luke brings out a story. Luke 14:12, parable of the great banquet. The great banquet is supposed to be attended by all of the rich and well-to-do and highly positioned people. But what does this story tell us? It tells us that actually these people didn't attend, and it was the poor that got invited in, those who were rejected by society that were brought into the great banquet. Then there's the blind beggar in Luke 18:35. The blind beggar who is cast out from society, sat on the side of a street hoping that somebody will drop him coins because there isn't welfare state. There's no way for him to earn currency or get food or be connected with society. He was just cast out on the side. And of course, at the other side of it, there's Zacchaeus in Luke 19:1, and he was marginalised because he was a tax collector doing a job for the Roman government that the local people didn't appreciate. So all of these people are isolated from society. And then there is one other group that I particularly want to focus on this morning, and that is in Luke 17, and it's verses 11 to 19, and it's the 10 lepers. And these lepers were people who were isolated from community. It says that Jesus is heading into Jerusalem, and as he goes into Jerusalem, he meets 10 lepers as he's heading that way at the edge of a village. And this is really interesting because you may think right now, sat at home, you've been stuck at home for 2, 3, 4 weeks, however long it's been. You've got so many more weeks to go. How can I possibly cope? Is this some new measure that they brought in for social distancing that the government and clever scientists and medical people have brought in? Actually, no. Social distancing was used as a health measure right back in biblical times. And leprosy, and these 10 lepers are a fine example of it. These guys were on the edge of the village because they had been isolated and separated from community, because they had a contagious disease that could have just drifted, it could have swept across the whole of society, just as COVID-19 is doing at the moment. So these guys had to be kept separate. And that means you can't work, you can't buy food, you can't have a family, you can't do all of the normal things, just walking in the street and meeting people and having a coffee. They couldn't do that. They couldn't go to Starbucks. So it's a little bit like us in this day and age and place that we're in at the moment. So what does Jesus do? These guys practice their social distancing really well. They might be together, but as Jesus comes in, they don't approach him. They stay at a distance and they call out to Jesus. And we expect Jesus to say number of different things that he would usually say. Lepers, your sins are forgiven you. Be healed. Or get up and walk. Get up and go. You have been set free. But he doesn't say any of those things. He doesn't say anything about healing and anything about sins forgiven. He just says, go up and show yourselves to the priests. And that's an interesting idea. Why would he send them to the priests? They're supposed to be isolated. They're not supposed to be going through into the town and into the local synagogue. And yet he sends them there. And as these 10 lepers go, they go before the priests. Why? What are the priests supposed to do? The priests do not have the ability to heal. The priests don't have any ability to do anything apart from to pronounce them clean if a miracle has taken place. And obviously what happened, these 10 lepers, they go through and they are deemed clean. And this is interesting because then Jesus, who is the one who has spoken to them, he is the one who gets the glory and the credit and the honour for this, and he gets it from the priest. It's representative of the law. The law is saying, well, these guys are lepers. At that time, there was no cure for leprosy, so these guys can't get healed. And yet here they are, healed. Wow. So the law is testifying through the priests and through the sacrifice they're going to make, is testifying to the fact that Jesus has done something and is somebody highly significant. And just let me explain for a moment about the sacrifice that was actually conducted by the priest, because this is really interesting, and it gives me an opportunity to preach from the book of Leviticus. And you won't have heard many sermons, I suspect, from the book of Leviticus. So what happens is the priests, when a leper is pronounced clean, they got two birds. One bird was killed and the other bird was a living sacrifice. So the bird that was killed, it's a bit graphic, a bit messy, but the blood of that bird is made available. And the living bird is dipped into the dead bird, and then it is pronounced clean, and then it is released into the fields. And that is a wonderful representation. The dead bird is representative, or the sacrifice bird, should I say, is representative of the sacrifice of Jesus. Sacrificed for sins to be given and for healing. And so this takes place, and yet the living bird, which represents us, we are dipped in his blood. It is through his blood that we are healed. It is through his blood that we are set free. And that is what happened, and that is what the lepers saw as they went there. And yet only one of them returns. And Luke makes the point here. It is not the guys who are the Jews, who understand the sacrificial system well, that return and thank Jesus. It's the Samaritan. So these guys have mixed together. It was the foreigner, the one who you wouldn't expect to do it, who went back and said thank you. And really, that's what I'm trying to share with you this morning. This sacrificial system that seems like so strange to us, and yet is representative of what Jesus did, and is what Jesus did for these lepers. And even when we read this story, sometimes what we think is here's a story about the lepers and the healing, and it's a miracle story. This is not just about a miracle story. As the lepers get their physical healing, they also get restored to community. They are able to come back. That and almost in them walking to the priest, that is the start of the process. They can get married. They can go back to work. They can have coffee at Starbucks. They can do all of these things because the disease, the sickness, the thing that was keeping them isolated has been pronounced clean and gone. And that is the power of Jesus, and that is what Luke throughout his book is touching on. It is not just about miracle stories and nice things that we like to focus on. It is about restoring women who were isolated back into community, lepers, the demon-possessed, all of these people being restored into community. And through our online events that we're doing, we are continuing to build community. We don't need a building for the church to be community. But I want to encourage you this morning, take courage from these verses, but also be aware of the people around you. There are people, and includes yourselves, and includes people in our church who are isolated, who are separated. We rejoice that for most of us that is a temporary separation. For the lepers, they thought of it, without the miracle, as a permanent separation. But these guys, and hopefully for us, it is a temporary separation that will help us to understand the Bible. But let's think, how can we be the hands and feet of Jesus whilst complying with the government regulations? How can we be the hands and feet of Jesus to those experiencing that isolation? And how can we bring these people into our community and let them be a part of who we are? Because I tell you what, there's a lot of communities and different groups around the world, but the community of Jesus, the community that we belong to in Hope Church, is the greatest and best community that there is. And I want to encourage you today, keep being a part of that community, keep looking out and contacting various folk in the church, but look out for your neighbours, look out for those who are isolated, and let's be the hands and feet of Jesus in Rotherham over these coming weeks. I hope you've taken something from this message. It's a privilege to share with you, and just have a wonderful day. Be blessed, be encouraged, and we'll see you for the Sunday service in a couple of days' time. God bless you.